Hi, I'm Jonah Comstock, Editor-in-Chief of pharmaphorum, and I'm here at the AAPS National Biotech Conference. I'm joined by Mehul Desai, the VP of Medical Affairs at Enable Injections. Thanks for joining me, Mehul.
Of course, happy to be here.
So first of all, tell me a little bit about Enable Injections. What do you guys do?
So we manufacture and market and commercialize an on-body delivery system called the enFuse, and that is our flagship product. Right, so an on-body delivery system is a system for large volume subcutaneous delivery that you put on your abdomen, and it delivers drugs through a very small needle underneath the skin.
So it's not perceptible as a needle for the patient.
They don't see it at all, actually. It's a hidden needle, and it's a 30 gauge needle, which is the smallest of any approved on-body.
And what are some of the use cases where you guys are right now?
Yeah, so we have several partners, so it's been it's been validated as FDA approved, right? So right now we have an FDA approved version with Apellis for a drug called Empaveli, and that's marketed as the Empaveli injector, right? And that's for a rare blood disorder called paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, or PNH. We have a partnership with Sanofi and Roche. With Sanofi, we have a partnership for Sarclisa, which is for multiple myeloma. So that's an in-clinic use. And then we have partnerships with Viridian, Serena, and CSL Behring, and Sobi as well.
Oh, wow.
Right. Yeah. So it's, technology has grown quite a bit in the past few years.
So you're here at the show partly because you have a poster presentation, some research you've done that kind of points at some of the reason people might want to look at a solution like yours, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that. It's a survey, right?
Yeah. It was a survey that we ran among experts in new product planning, early R&D, combination product, and CMC, right? And I think before I can explain the results of the poster, I have to explain kind of like why we did it, and also what was the reason why we got the results that we got, right? And so in our space of large volume sub-Q delivery, there is a myth that's been propagated that you cannot deliver more than 2 or 3 ml sub-Q. So when you see these auto-injector pens, right, like for the GLP-1s, for example, they all deliver around 2.25 mLs. So it's a belief that, you can't deliver more than that. Well, that is false, right? There's been several drugs approved that have delivered volumes greater than 3 mLs and all the way up to 100 mLs even.
Wow.
Right? So it's a myth. That drug that approves up to 100 was approved in 2010, yet the myth has still been propagated. And so our research showed that about 90% of the participants had seen a drug abandoned or deprioritized just because of a drug volume greater than 3 mLs.
Where does that misperception come from? That used to be the case, or?
Yeah, it was just some older research that was around. Just also, if you think about it spatially, you would think like that your space couldn't handle more than 2 mLs, right? Right underneath the skin. But it can handle more than that amount. You just have to give it time to absorb, right? And so there are some also companies that they have a vested interest in propagating that myth, right? So
sure.
Yeah.
With something like, you have a wearable injector, it can do it. It can take as much time as it needs to, right, to administer.
Yeah, roughly, let's say about a milliliter per minute is around what it is, but it depends on a lot of variables, right? It depends on the viscosity of the drug as well, how thick the drug is, right?
So just to put these findings in perspective, I mean, assuming everyone was, being honest and accurate, there's some huge number of drugs that are just potential that's just being wasted, things that aren't being developed for no real good reason. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's what really the finding was, because we also went on to ask, okay, of these drugs that you've seen abandoned or deprioritized, what percentage do you perceive those to have like commercial value? Like how often do they have commercial value? And it was like 80% of the time, right? So you see how a myth that was kind of a myth that spread among CMC teams and combination product teams eventually spread to early R&D and new product planning, and actually started impacting pipelines, which then impacted a negative impact on innovation, right? And less therapies to patients.
It's wild because it's an industry that so prides itself on being, data driven and making these decisions based on on science and not just intuition, but I guess this sort of assumption can still creep in.
Yeah, we have multiple data sets that show that there's a lack of that the industry is not well informed on this, and we're going to be publishing those this year. We've actually published them in posters already, but we're doing a bunch of peer-reviewed papers on this topic. Right.
So this research is obviously, there's some self-interest for you guys. I mean, it's going to help expand your addressable market.
Exactly.
But I sense there's also more. There's a public interest aspect to this too. Even if people don't go with enable injections, they should know that they can go with a larger.
Exactly. Yeah, they should know that these drugs can be delivered. They can go through discovery and eventually end up in patients. Right. And they have been doing so for decades. Right.
In general, I mean, what trends do you see around sort of injectable as a modality? I mean, I know GLP-1s have probably brought more attention to that space than it's had in a while, but then of course there's also these races to get those in pill form. Mm-hmm. But then I was just doing research about this yesterday because Wegovy did their submission to the FDA. There's when they do come out with these pills, like for Ribellis, the uptake wasn't quite as good as they expected. A lot of people are still going with the injectable for Ozempic. So how do you see that kind of market shaping out right now in various spaces, not just GLP-1s, but what are kind of the myths and the realities of injectables versus pills and other?
The orals, they go through your GI tract. They go through something called first pass metabolism, where they lose a lot of where you lose a lot of drug. Hence why you have a low bioavailability with orals, right? And when you are taking an oral, oftentimes it's not just one capsule, it's like 3, so it's a high pill burden. And then you have to take these multiple times a day, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 times a day. Whereas the alternative is just take a sub-Q injection once per week, right? With a fairly small needle.
So this notion that the pill is always more convenient for the customer is always preferred, that's not really right.
Not in our experience. In our experience, you're actually seeing companies do something called half-life extension. So, okay, well, I don't like getting an injection once a week. Well, what if you had to do it once a month? What if you had to do it once a quarter? How about 2 times a year, right? And why that has benefited us is because you can extend the half-life of an antibody, but regardless, you're going to need a larger dose, and a larger dose correlates with a larger drug volume. Hence how you get into large volume sub-Q.
Right, it goes back to the research.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I would ask you, would you rather take a pill every day or take 4 injections a year?
Right, at some point. I think another thing is when people hear injection, they think a shot, they think a needle. They think, and who wants to do that on a regular basis? But increasingly, that's not the case, right? These subcutaneous injections are becoming more and more common for more and more use cases.
Yeah, I think, you're seeing sub-Q development, especially in oncology, right? You've seen some of the biggest blockbusters going all sub-Q now. And it's not just that, some of them have better safety when they're injected sub-Q because you get what's called less Cmax related adverse events, right? Because when you go IV, it's 100% bioavailability that's assumed, so you get a really high level of drug and then it falls off, right? But overall injectables, I think, are being accepted quite well now, and they're doing things to make it easier on patients, such as using smaller needles, right? So for example, like we use a 30 gauge needle, but some other applications use a 23 gauge needle. For reference, you've probably had your blood drawn at a doctor. That's a 21 gauge needle, so it's not far off. Right, so improving that patient experience as opposed to focusing on the speed of delivery is something that we try to balance at Enable with our device.
I'm curious, is there an opportunity in pediatrics? I've got a little baby at home, and he doesn't love getting shots.
It's interesting. Enable actually started as a painless vaccine delivery company, and that idea didn't work out. It was some technology license from Cincinnati Children's. Just think there isn't as much of a market there, but it is something that we're exploring.
Right. As the technology becomes more, all of the use cases become anything, it's day 2. Anything you've seen or heard at the show or any interesting conversations you've had?
I've had some conversations around like using lower concentration formulations and higher volumes. So that's something that we had pushed for a couple of years ago. We published a paper in the MABS journal about how you don't need to use these really high concentration formulations that aggregate. You can use lower concentration, large volume formulations, now that there's technologies that enable the delivery of that, right?
And is the advantage there reduced toxicity and things like that? Or?
It's actually better physical stability of the formulation, less viscosity. So when you're doing manufacturing, for example, it sticks to the manufacturer equipment, you get lower yields, right? So technically, the more viscous it is, the harder it is to work with, right? It's like working with water versus oil.
Yeah, or maple syrup or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, very cool. I mean, I love getting into something like this where there's a niche within a niche. It's so interesting in comic, but maybe a lot of people don't think about all of these little levers.
Yeah, it gets very, very technical, and there's a lot of things that we focus on that are maybe underappreciated. I'm happy to go through some of those, but I think one of the ones that we're focused on now is the burden on nurses, right? So right now, nurses that are delivering large volume sub-Q drugs have to stand over a patient about a little bit closer than this and just inject for 5 to 10 minutes staring and talking to the patient, right? And now if you do that 10, 20 times a day, you're getting a repetitive strain injury here. You're spending 10 minutes here that you could be doing something else. And also what we've heard is there's a cognitive fatigue where you're just having these constant conversations, having to maintain a small talk, right? With our device, the value is that they can prepare the drug by the patient. They can put the injector on the patient, press the button, and go get other work done, right?
Yeah.
So,
and the patient can read a book or take a nap or whatever.
Actually, they can do light to moderate activities with the enFuse on, depending on their condition and the disease state that we get approved in with them, right? So, there's a lot of little things that we're now trying to bring out and make more prominent, right? Things that are maybe underappreciated.
So you mentioned you have a lot of great partnerships. You're working with a lot of big names. How are things going with the nasal injections? Are you finding you're in a growth? You're having more and more conversations.
Yeah, I think when you look at this recent news flow we've had with partnerships, manufacturing expansion, we just got CE marked. I mean, we're exactly where we need to be, and everyone's focused on executing now, right? Because we have close to 10 partner programs, right?
Wow.
So that's come a long way in the past few years. So yeah, I'd say Enable is exactly where they need to be.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. Really appreciate learning a little bit more about what you do and about this research.
Yeah, happy to explain. So thanks, Jonah.